Welcome to Saxon Math Course 3. Today we're talking about Lesson 12, Decimal Numbers. Our objectives for today: after this lesson you should be able to understand the relationship between place values and the function of the decimal point in our number system, write decimal numbers using words, compare and order decimal numbers, convert between fractions, decimal numbers, and percents, and compare and order different forms of rational numbers. Convert between forms of rational numbers to solve problems. Some review from our last lesson. Remember we talked about changing fractions into percents, and you do that by either writing an equivalent fraction with a denominator of 100 by multiplying the numerator and the denominator, or if your denominator can't be multiplied by anything to get to 100, then you multiply the whole fraction by 100% over 1. We also changed percents into fractions by using the percent as the numerator and making 100 the denominator and then reducing. And to solve percent of a number problems, we converted the percent into a reduced fraction and then found the fraction of the number. So here's a chart right out of your book for today's lesson, Lesson 12. And this just shows our decimal place values through the millionths. So you've known your place values for a long time now, your ones, tens, hundreds, thousands, 10,000s, 100,000s, and then right here you've got your decimal point in the middle, and then you do the same thing, but you add THS at the end of everything when you're going to the right. So we have tenths, hundredths, thousandths, 10,000ths, 100,000ths, and millionths. And the way to think about this that might help you is to realize that as you're moving left on the place value chart, you're multiplying by 10. So millionths times 10 would be 100,000ths. 100,000ths times 10 would be 10,000ths. Thousandths times 10 is hundredths. Hundredths times 10 is tenths. And then tenths times 10 would get you to ones, and then it just keeps going up the other way. So what that should tell you is that when you multiply by 10, you're moving your decimal point over to the right. So if we're reading a decimal number, if we were going to read this decimal number, we would say 2, and then you say the word and at the decimal point, and then you say 34, and the farthest to the right place value is the one that we say. So this one would be 34 hundredths because 4 is in the hundredths place. Here's another one. If there's a 0 here, you really don't need to say 0 and. You can just say 145, and the 5 is in the thousandths place, so we say 145 thousandths. Here's a really big one. They probably won't give you ones this big, but we can practice it anyway. So you'd say 264 and 2,902. The 2 is in the 10,000ths place, so we would say 10 thousandths. 264 and 2,902 10,000ths. If we were going to order decimal numbers, the way I would do that is to put them vertically on top of each other, lining up your decimal places. So if we're given these 4 decimal numbers, we'll just line them up like this. So I'm lining up my decimal points, and I'm going to fill in the empty places with 0 too, so that helps me. So when you look at these, you're going to compare. So if I'm going least to greatest, obviously these are all zeros, so those don't help me. So I need to look at my tenths place. In my numbers, I have a 5, a 4, a 0, and a 4. So 0 is the least of all of those. That means that which is 5/100ths, by the way, is going to be first. It's the smallest number. Now, though, I've got two 4s, so I have to look in the hundredths place. So I have a 0 and I have a 1. 0 is less than 1, so my next smallest number is 405 thousandths. Then my other 4 comes first, which is 41 hundredths. And my largest number had the 5 in the tenths place, so 5/10ths is my largest number. So that would be those numbers from least to greatest. If we want to write a decimal number as a fraction, you write the fraction that you say when you read the decimal number. So now we practiced saying decimal numbers. You just write the same fraction that you would read the same way. So if we're looking at this number is 1 and 24 hundredths. That's how you say that number based on what we learned earlier in the video. So then you write the mixed number that you would read the same way, 1, and then 24 over 100 is 24 hundredths. So 1 and 24 hundredths. And then all you do is reduce the fraction part of it the same way we reduced fractions before. You divide by the greatest common factor. So when we do that, we find out that 24 over 100 reduces to 6 over 25. So 1 and 24 hundredths is the same as 1 and 6/25ths as a mixed number. If we want to go the other way, convert fractions into decimals, all you do is use that fraction as a division problem. So here we're going to do 5/8 into a decimal. So really what 5/8 is showing is the number 5 divided by 8. And you know we can't do that the way it is, so we make it 5, we'll just do 5.00. So 8 goes into 5 0 times, 8 goes into 50, that would be 6 times. We follow our division pattern, that would be 2. And now when you get to a point where there's nothing else left up here, we did this last year, you add another 0. And you're going to keep adding zeros and dividing until one of three things happens. Until either we get to a point where we don't have any more, we don't need to divide anymore because we've stopped the decimal, or until we end up finding a repeating pattern in the decimal. Sorry, I should have said one of two things, not three things. But you're either going to see a repeating pattern or you're just going to be done dividing. So this one, when we bring our 0 down, we see that it goes into 45 times, and that's it, because then this ends up being 0, so we're done. So that means 5/8 is the same as 625 thousandths. That's how you would write that as a decimal. Decimals into percents, all we do is move the decimal point 2 places to the right. So if we want to write 45 hundredths as a percent, we take that decimal point and move it 2 places to the right. So all we did was move this over 2 spots so that it's 45.0, and that's our percent, 45%. So that's pretty simple. And it's pretty simple going the other way too. Percents to decimals, you move the decimal point 2 places to the left. So if we wanted to write 89% as a decimal, we can also write it as 89.0%. That helps us know where the decimal point is. So we move that 2 to the left, 1, 2, and it becomes 89 hundredths. So 89% is the same as 89 hundredths. That's all for your lesson today. Make sure you do your practice problems, put any questions you have in that video discussion section, and we'll talk about them in class. We'll see you in lesson 13.